what I personally think, right, is the problem with these sci-fi movies is the team, the director and the team, they don't invest so much into the science part of it. They don't do a lot of research. So it's always a good idea to actually get an expert in the field, like a science advisor, like and take his basically his comments. And what directors normally try to do is that they're trying to fit in the science so that the story, how they have imagined the story is basically their main aim. And what they try to do is try to fit in the science in that. But you have to
True.
think about the science also. You have to think about the accuracy of the science also. So it's always a good
Right.
idea to get a science advisor, like
Right.
we had Kip Thorne on
Uh-huh.
Interstellar team.
Hmm.
So yeah, I think that is something everyone can do.
Yeah, yeah, and Kip Thorne is a big deal because he got the Nobel Prize, I think, in 2017, right? For
Yeah,
his work in the gravitational waves thing, right? So he is a big deal. He's not like a muck around key, just went to a college and picked up an
yeah.
expert.
So he's actually a very big name in the science
True.
community. So as you mentioned, he won a Nobel
Hmm.
Prize, right? He won the Nobel Prize for his work on
Right.
LIGO. So LIGO is this structure, or you can say a detector
Yeah.
kind of a thing that helped us detect the gravitational
Right.
waves for the first time. So gravitational waves,
Yeah.
again, the whole concept of it comes
Yeah.
from general relativity. So Carl, he was also
Hmm.
friends with
Hmm.
Stephen Hawking and Carl Sagan. So quite a big name in the science community, and yeah, a fun guy and
Right.
have
I'm
lots of
I'm
knowledge
guessing
of
a
his
lot of
thing.
people are already scared by hearing these terms and probably have already switched off. But the remaining ones I think will probably enjoy this because this is going to get even more nerdier. I'm pretty sure. Like given the notes that we have for this, it's going to get even nerdier than this. So right. Where does Interstellar stand for you in terms of like this scientific accuracy, in terms of this in this genre?
So if I have to rate the movie on a scale of 1 to 10, I think I'll rate it as 7, because a lot of science in it is accurate, based on all the calculations and you know, uh, Gibson's knowledge. And a lot
Right.
of science in it is actually not that accurate. And the movie does have a
Right.
lot of loopholes.
Hmm.
But a lot of aspects of the movie, other than the science, also stands out, like the music. It's amazing because Hans
Yes.
Zimmer, obviously.
Yes. Yes.
And then the visualization of it, like the CG teams that worked on it, and the whole visualization part of the movie is like so good.
Fascinating. True.
And I really feel bad for the people who didn't go to theater to watch this movie,
Yes.
because it's a whole lot of a different kind of experience in
True.
itself, like when you watch the movie on a big
True.
screen. So yeah, so I think I would rate it as
Yeah.
7.
I won't rate it because I have a huge bias for Christopher Nolan. I mean, I remember like when this film came out, we were in college and I went to Hyderabad because Hyderabad was the only place which had like this IMAX theater. So I wanted to enjoy it in its fullest glory, and I was like, I need to watch it in an IMAX. So I went to Hyderabad for that. So for that reason, I'm not gonna rate it, but I really like it. Obviously, that's why I'm doing a podcast on it. Otherwise, why would I? But in any case, I think you're correct on the part that it's accurate, more accurate than most of the movies that we've seen in this genre. But there are very large looming loopholes in the film, which are probably from the extension of the speculative science part of the movie that we'll probably discuss later. But there's a good portion of the truth, the truth of the science which is there in the movie itself. So that was very refreshing for me to see. Okay, so I think first if it's okay with you, we'll start with how like this film came into existence. Like how when did it start and all of that stuff. So do you have any inputs on this, or should I start by myself?
So the original idea was
Right,
of Kip
right.
Thorne's idea. He always wanted to make a movie that will help the general audience understand, some aspects
Mhm,
of general relativity. So that is
mhm,
how the idea was born. And then in I think 2003, I'm not sure about the year, Kip Thorne and one more lady. I'm
Yeah.
not sure about her name. So they
Right.
approached Nolan Brothers, right?
Mm.
And they were like, okay, this is the idea, and
Mm.
do you think you can make a movie on it? So that is how this whole movie came
Yeah,
into
yeah, and
existence in its
the
first
the
place.
lady's name was Linda Obst. Uh, I think it's a very Scandinavian name, but like I'll take a chance on that. So they started writing this movie. Kip Thorne started writing this movie, like the outline of it, in early 2000s. I'm not sure if 2003, but early 2000s. And then it took it to the Nolan brothers, Linda and Kip Thorne. And the intention behind them making the movie was to depict the science as accurately as possible. So that had to form like the backbone of the film. Otherwise, it was a no deal for Kip Thorne. It was very specifically mentioned over there. But by the time they started shooting the film, the entire story had changed so much than what Kip Thorne had ever pitched to them. Like it now had a father-daughter element into it, and the father was not a physicist by himself. So it's a different story altogether. But he was happy with the fact that at the core of it, Christopher Nolan kept the science intact, at least to the best of his abilities. And he was able to depict the science in a way that it piques interest, at least in the audience, about what all of this is, which is quite a thing. I mean, influencing. I'm a big fan of influencing an audience into gaining knowledge from media, not just like film media, but like written media as well, and not just like superimposing your opinions, but like opening a debate about it. I'm a very big fan of that, and I think Nolan was very well versed in that aspect, because most of his films were like this open ending films back then, and it opened a debate amongst the audiences. And it's like Inception had this concept of lucid dreaming, and other aspects of it. So all of this stuff, the intention behind the film was very very correct, at least from my point of view, and also from Kip's point of view. And I remember, like in one of his interviews with Christopher Nolan back in 2014, 2013, if I remember correctly, with the Time magazine, they were talking about how there's a big scene which was supposed to be done, which was like this multi-million-dollar scene. And Kip Thorne just was adamant that I will not do this because this is not scientifically very accurate. So what they wanted to do basically was that they wanted to travel faster than the speed of light. And and Kip Thorne was like, no, this is not going to happen. I'm not going to let that happen in any of this, because that will probably nullify
Exactly.
all of the other aspects of the film, or the physics of the film on which the film really stands upon. So Nolan had to scrap the entire scene, which was like this multi-million-dollar big shot scene. And yeah, so they had to settle for that. And Nolan was pissed for a while, but like Kip said, probably in like 3 hours or so, he was more than okay with it, with the direction that the film was going. But yeah, but we have to re-emphasize the fact that since this is science fiction, there are portions that are speculative, like largely speculative, and I think the only discretion that we have in terms of the speculation is that a large portion of those speculations were done by Kip Thorne himself. Like it was an extension of what could be, and not just an arbitrary extension that, okay, so now we just going to become this size of which is smaller than the Planck's constant, which is just not going to happen. So it's still based on science, the speculation part, but it's still speculation at the end of the day. Right. So do you have anything to add on this? Yeah.
Yeah, that's the advantage of having actually a science
Right.
advisor
Right. Oh, we
on the film. He'll help you
right.
understand
Right.
how to, take the accuracy of science and then also,
Right. Right.
proceed with the
Right.
movie,
But it takes
the
it takes
storyline.
immense skill to be translating a science into say sort of a filmmaking aspect, because writing science is different, visualizing science is another thing. You need to understand how to visualize, especially we'll come to the black hole part. Like the visual representation of the black hole was something which was so, I was so happy to see that, at least just, even if like the visuals were not so good, which they are very good, but even if they were not so good, and I got to know the process behind making those visuals, I would have been very, very satisfied with the way that they projected it. And it's yeah, it's such a great process. It's such an amazing process to be involved in that. And that is something which because I'm making videos, I'm constantly trying to do something like that, like merging like these two things that I have, like an affinity for, like science and filmmaking. But it's very difficult to do that. So it's a brilliant job that the Nolan brothers did on this, along with like Kip Thorne, to be able to have a visual representation of the science in the film. Right. So we can, I think, start with the plot of the film now. Like uh, let's first start with, why did we need to leave the planet in the first place? By the way, spoilers ahead. I mean, do I even need to say that? But okay. So let's start with the fact that why we needed to leave the planet in the first place, like because of the dust storms and because of the blight. So I'm not sure if people know what blight is. I don't know what blight was until I did like a very brief Google search, and I understood that it's a disease which is caused by bacteria, fungi, which turn into pathogens and then form a certain disease. So it was either you die of starvation because all the crops were dead because of blight, or either you die of suffocation because of the dust storms and all of that stuff. Uh, what I got to know was that blight, although is a general disease term, it's very specific to the chemistry and like the biology of the plant which it's infecting, to be honest. So at this point of time, it's a stretch to think that blight might affect every plant crop that's there, every crop species that's there on the earth. But then again, pathogens can evolve, they can mutate genetically. And I mean, I shouldn't be telling that because we are seeing a pathogen ruining lives right now with the coronavirus. And so blight can do that, but then again, that's the speculative part of the film, that it's mutated to a certain form that it's affecting almost all the crops that exist uh, in on the earth, and that's why that was one of the reasons that we had to leave the earth for that. So I think that's
So,
the blight part that I had
I think in the
to
movie it
cover. Do
is
you have
like,
anything to add on this?
assume that only handful people are left on the planet, because most of them have either died because of the suffocation that is being caused by the dust
Right.
storms, or starvation, obviously. So that's the, again, the speculative part of the movie. And
Hmm.
this dust storm thing, I think it happened in America,
Right.
some decades back. So the inspiration for this part of the movie actually came from that.
Hmm.
So this somewhere I read. I don't remember the exact source of
Right.
information, but yeah, this actually, there was this incident that
Right.
you know gave the inspiration for this part of the movie. Yeah.
Now we have decided that we're going to leave the earth, like for humanity's sake. In order to save humanity, we have to leave earth altogether. So now we get into the process of finding a planet, like a suitable candidate of a habitable planet where we can go and ship ourselves. What I wanted to discuss is how that process of finding a suitable planet, say from some other galaxy, happens, or some other solar system. I don't know, whatever you want to call it, that happens.
There are a few factors that you have to basically,
Mhm.
see that they are met. So basically, some preconditions that
Mhm.
have to be met in order to call a planet a habitable planet, right? So what scientists
Right.
normally do is that they look around for planets that basically fall in the habitable zone. So habitable zone is like
Right.
area around, or a region around the star, where the
Mhm.
temperature is right for the sustenance of
Mhm.
life, right? Sustenance of our life at least. So
Mhm.
that's the habitable zone. So if any planet falls in that habitable zone, we will look into other factors now, right?
Right.
So the other factors are basically your atmosphere, the constituency of the atmosphere. It
Mhm.
should have the right elements to it. Oxygen, as we all know, is very important for our sustenance, right, for our existence. So oxygen should be there, nitrogen should be there, and some other elements should be there. So that's the atmospheric part of it. Then the radiation, the distance, basically the distance from the star is very important,
True.
as we discussed the temperature part of it. Uh, the other thing is the
Right.
radiation. So if this planet is really close to the star, right, you will basically, have to suffer from a lot of radiation, and you will die out of you will die
Right.
of the radiation first. So that also is something that is very important. And obviously, water should be there, either in
Right.
solid or in liquid form. So that's another part of it. Also, the
Yeah.
surface of
Yeah.
the planet is very important.
Like the molecular chemistry of the planet is so much more important, but then again it's automatically dependent on how close or far away from the star it is. So basically we are looking for a star, and then we are looking for the exoplanets or the planets orbiting around that star, and then we find suitable candidates from there, I guess, right? So I think recently, when was it, 2015, 16, we found that there was this I don't know how to say this, I probably butchered the name. It's Proxima Centauri or something like that. That's the closest.
Yeah. So the planet is called Proxima
Right.
b,
Yeah.
and the star it is revolving around is called
Right.
Proxima Centauri.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, the planet is called Proxima b, correct. And that system, that solar system, if so, is about 4.244 light years away from our sun. So I think people probably know the concept of light years. Like, it's, if you travel at the speed of light, it's going to take you 4.244 years to get there, basically. So with our current human abilities and with our human technology that we have, we can't reach there. That's almost impossible. And the film showcases the same problem, that we can't reach there unless there is a sort of a portal that we have an access to. And that is where I think the wormhole part and the four-dimensional part of the entire science behind Interstellar comes in. So we probably will need to explain how a wormhole works, and how it connects like two systems like these. Probably wormhole is probably not existing in our dimension, it's probably existing in some other dimension which is higher than our dimension. So let's say just for like theorizing purposes, let's say it exists in the fourth dimension, and our universe is like a warped universe, which is, say, like a belt which is bent like this, with a tipping point over here. So what the wormhole does is that it connects, if you travel like linearly from our space and time, you have to go through this and then back again from this part. uh, but what a wormhole does is that it connects this point to this point, which is, say, our target point over here. So if you're able to connect from here to here, using the fourth dimensional properties, or whatever you want to call, like, we can call it the bulk if you want to, like what the film has called it, and probably what other scientists call it as well. So what we can do is that, with the help of reducing this four-dimensional aspect into three-dimensional, and then using this wormhole as this two-dimensional y-axis portal between the two target areas that we have, we can reduce all of this light year distance into significantly smaller distance, and we can travel within years rather than, say, thousands and millions of years, with the limitations that we have. But then again, the existence of a wormhole in itself is so questionable, and I think you'll probably be able to add on to that, because, like, I saw a glimpse of your note and probably have a lot more to talk about that. So I'll let it to you, that you talk about the wormhole and its possibilities, and how it can come into existence, probably into our system.
So, as you just said, wormholes are these,
Right.
theoretical concepts that have, yet to be discovered. So we do not have any physical, this thing of existing wormhole. So wormholes were like first discovered by Albert Einstein and his,
Mhm.
theory of, general theory of relativity. So if I have to, explain it in our world, right? So our world is a 3D world, right?
Mhm.
So you can think of a wormhole as 2 points.
Mhm.
So one is like an entry point, and another one is like an exit point.
Mhm.
Okay. So when I say point, they in our world they'll be like spheres,
Right.
right? So yeah. So normally when we think about wormholes or we think about black holes, we think of this, circular thing that you fall into it,
Yeah.
right? So it'll people normally imagine it as a well which you basically
Right.
fall into. So that is not how it basically happens. So in our world, in our 3D world, you'll have two spheres. So one will act as an entry point, and the other one will act as an exit point. And these two spheres will be connected by a
Right.
four-dimensional tunnel. Again, this tunnel will exist in
Mm.
four dimension and not in our dimension. That in the
Bulk.
movie
Right.
is referred as to bulk, right? Yeah. And so this is how
Right.
we imagine it in our world. If we have to
Mhm.
think it in a two-dimensional world, right? So then now your entry and exit
Right.
points will basically become two circles, right? And the tunnel that
Three
is
dimensional.
joining these two
Right.
circles will become a three-dimensional structure. Yeah. So that is how you can visualize it. The terms that we use, wormholes and black holes, they are quite they basically misguide a lot of people, and that's the
Right.
reason why a lot of people think it is
Right.
like a hole
It's
kind of a
not.
thing. It's like a well kind
If you
of
can answer that, you'll
basically fall
probably.
into.
And even the fact that we're talking that it's in fourth dimension, that's still theoretical. Like we don't know the exact like what is the degree of the higher dimension that we're talking about over here. That's just something that we have applied to be able to visualize in our dimensional three-dimensional world, but we never really know what extent of dimensionality is obviously there when a wormhole exists and when a black hole exists. And also the fact that a lot of people tend to combine like not just people, like even scientists tend to combine wormholes with black holes together. And there's also this fact that wormhole theoretically cannot exist by itself. It needs to have a lot of sustained energy, a lot of negative energy to be exact, to be able to sustain itself. And the fact that negative energy in such amounts, in such tremendous amounts, cannot exist, at least with our theoretical limitations. The the future of being a wormhole being there naturally, occurring naturally, seems very very bleak. Uh, uh, like it, I don't know if we should like extend on what negative energy or negative mass really is. But if you want, if you're curious, you can probably look into it. Just search negative energy, and you'll probably find like a lot of articles and even like probably Wikipedia pages for it. So yeah, wormholes cannot exist naturally with our limited knowledge that we have of space and time. So that's why in the movie itself, the wormhole is placed by a being of a higher dimension. So it's not a naturally occurring thing, and it's placed there because of they want something from us, apparently, in terms of the storytelling thing, that they want to help us to reach this place, which is the other galaxy. So in that aspect, I think I feel that they have the scientific liberty to be able to conclude that probably it's been placed there for our humanity's sake rather than say uh, just a trap, because we're already dying over here. What will they probably get from like finishing us one by one by shuttling space shuttles through there? So I think that that's something which is I would let it pass in a way that yeah, it's fine. It helps in thickening the plot about what's on the other side. But what I wanted to talk about is the depiction of the wormhole when they went through the portal. Do you remember that? So when Cooper, Brand, and I'm forgetting the name. It's some Italian name.
Romilly.
Yeah. Correct. So when they were passing through the portal,
I don't remember the fourth person's name. I don't know why. I always forget his name.
right, true. I think he was there in Hunger Games as well, and I was like, yeah, I don't know who you are. But then again, right. So all of these people, they were traveling through the portal, the wormhole portal, uh, and we saw this depiction of a wormhole, which was this warped space-time thingy, and they were like, "This is," and they were, I think, they shook hands with the other being, they were, which was like bending the mass inside the wormhole itself. So that was something which was a little out of the blue for me. Like by that time, I was a little invested, even in 2014, about how wormholes, like how passing through a wormhole portal would look like. And it was Kip Thorne's book, which I keep forgetting the name. It was I think a book about black holes and wormholes. Maybe that was the title itself. It was an early 90s, mid 90s book. And he was mentioning how passing through the portal would be like passing through a lift. You won't even realize it. It just opens and it closes on you. That's all that there is to it. So there is no visual drama attached to it. So I think when they were, I saw this in an interview in the making, that this is the one scientifically absolutely inaccurate thing that exists in the movie, that I lost the fight with Christopher Nolan, uh, when he decided to add visual drama to the wormhole scene. It's not going to look like that. It's not going to happen like that. You probably don't even realize that you've passed a wormhole. Uh, yeah, so that's something which is the extended speculation part, which I'm not a very big fan of. But yeah, it's fine.
Actually, science can sometimes become very
It
boring,
it
right?
yes.
When we, yeah, so they have to add in a little drama to, keep the audience invested in the
I
movie.
mean, I mean,
So
okay. So now we've passed the wormhole. We are venturing into this other system, other galaxy, uh, where we see that the black hole in itself is sort of acting like a star. It's not really a star, but it's acting like a star where the planets really orbit around it. And I think there's the Miller's planet, there's Dr. Mann's planet, and then there's Edmund's planet, if I'm correct, like with the third name. I'm not sure about that. So we have these three candidates, just orbiting the black hole. But let's first talk about black hole in general. So I would let you initiate that. Like, let's just explain what black hole is, and I'll just chip in if there's something that I feel like I need to add on.
okay, so a black hole is, you can think of a black hole as a region in the space that has
Right,
such strong gravity that once anything crosses the event horizon of the black hole, it cannot come out of it, not even light. So it has such
right,
strong gravity. And
right,
if we have to talk about how a black hole basically forms, is think of a huge star, maybe a star with a mass of maybe 3 times that of our suns, right?
right.
And when the star runs out of fuel, so basically a sun has hydrogen in it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So hydrogen fuses into helium, and then, like, so on and so forth. So once a sun is out of hydrogen, is out of helium, and the last thing that the sun has is iron, right?
Mm-hmm.
So iron cannot get fused to in the further
Mm-hmm.
process. So once that happens, the gravity becomes the stronger force here, and the sun will basically
Right,
explode, right? And it will explode into a supernova. So it's a beautiful explosion kind of a thing, right? And after the supernova, either the sun can become a
right.
white dwarf, right? It's a very compact
Mm-hmm.
star, we can call, or it will become
Right,
into a black hole. So that is how normally your black holes are formed. Now we have three types of black holes, right? So you have a supermassive black hole that you find in the middle of every galaxy. It's presumed again, and then you have a stellar black hole, and then you have the intermediate black hole. So if you are to talk about supermassive black holes, they are, as I said, they are found in the middle of each and every galaxy, and they are, scientists
right.
think that they were formed right after Big Bang. Okay, and they become such big black holes by
Mm-hmm.
engulfing all the material that was around them, the matter around them,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe by fusing with other black holes. So that is how they became so massive. And as you said, that it's like a solar system, right? So the black holes kind of act like our sun, because they have such strong gravity
Right,
that anything that is
right.
in close proximity to it will start revolving around it.
Yeah, but that is where I think the general relativity physics part ends in terms of a black hole, because as we like literally deep dive into a black hole, we see that the physics just breaks down completely, and we don't have the answer. So like what I'm trying I think when I'll probably release this or edit this podcast, I'll probably have this diagram of what a black hole looks like, because like you said, event horizon. So I think people would need a little bit more visual cues to understand what an event horizon is. So I think what we can do is that to visualize a black hole, I'm just trying to make it as visualizable as possible. So imagine that there's a trampoline of sort, okay, uh, and you use like your probably your finger in the middle of the trampoline, and then you press it down, and you have the strength. Let's imagine to press it down, say infinitely, and then you see that there's this sort of a conical fulcrum sort of a shape, which has like a point at the end of it where like the black hole theoretically ends or has its ending point over there. So this tip at the end of it is called the singularity. Now there are different types of singularity which we'll cover a little later, but it's called a singularity, and this is where all hell breaks loose in terms of physics, because people have been trying to understand what really happens at the singularity when like Mars enters over there, or say any particle enters over there, not even just Mars, even like light, if it enters over there, what the hell happens over there. And that is the point where general relativity physics, or the classical physics I would say, just kind of breaks down, and that is where we need the help of quantum physics to help us understand what's going on in terms of singularity. Okay, so now write a few I don't know, distance away from the singularity, there's this event horizon. uh, Again, I think when I'm visualizing this, I'm visualizing this in a 3D space. This is not necessarily a 3D space in reality, but for the sake of visualization, yes. So this event horizon automatically becomes this sort of a circle, because we're converting 3D, breaking down into a section, which will again be a 2D, which is a circle. So when we have this circle, it's like a like an LOC of sorts. So if you cross this, if you cross the event horizon, you are destined to be perpetually flowing towards the singularity, because above the event horizon, even the time and space, they warp around the wormhole, and below that they go uniformly directionally towards the singularity. So there's a lot of force, not just gravitational force, but like electrostatic forces as well, which are pulling you towards the singularity over there. So you can understand or visualize this event horizon as, if you cross this, you're entering the singularity, you're entering the deepest reaches of the black hole. And if you're above this, I'm not sure if you can still go back or back out, but theoretically it's not as threatening in terms of the forces which exist as compared to, say, like below the event horizon. So this is I think probably my attempt at making you understand this.
A lot of people actually think that once you're close to the event horizon,
Right.
anything basically close to the black hole will eventually fall into it. That is not the case.
Right.
So you have to basically cross the
True.
event horizon, and then that is the point where from where you cannot return
Right.
back, right? But anything beyond the event horizon, is safe.
Right.
I would say,
Right.
kind of
Right.
safe, yeah. So not everything that is around the black hole has to fall
True.
into the black hole
True.
just because of
And
it.
if I remember
Yeah.
correctly, uh, even in the film, when Cooper was entering into the black hole, and when he was crossing the event horizon, his ship had crossed the event horizon, and his ship was almost all in darkness, but you could still see outside. You could still see on top of the event horizon where there was light, and where you could see the other like surface of the black hole, if I could say that. So it's I think that's that attention to detail over there, that once you cross the event horizon, even light can't escape. That was something which was very, very nice to see. Yeah.
Or they have shown in the movie, especially when he enters into the black hole, is like so horrendous. Sorry for saying this, but so a lot of fact actually, so there's this thing called
Mhm.
spaghettification, right? So basically, if you're falling into the black hole with your
Mhm.
feet first, right? So your feet will basically
Right.
experience more gravity
Right.
than your head. So your body will stretch into this
Yes.
infinitely long thread kind of a thing. that they didn't show in the movie. Also, the kind of damage the spaceship, faced
Right,
was
right,
basically nothing. The kind of force that you're experiencing inside a
right.
black hole is huge.
Yes,
But yeah,
yes. I mean,
so that was
I
a
have a
funny part.
counter for that, but I'll come to a little later because that is something which I was reading this, not reading. I'm not good at reading. I was listening to this audiobook by Kip Thorne himself. It's the Science of Interstellar. I don't know if you've read that book, and in that he was explaining why did he not just shred into pieces when he entered the horizon, because his feet are supposed to extend infinitely and his head is supposed to be there, so it's supposed to like just snap into half, at least half, and then like exponentially otherwise. And he just explained about the possibilities of having like other types of singularities, not just a chaotic singularity over there. I'll get into that a little bit later. Let's first talk about how the like why did the black hole look the way it did in terms of like the appearance in the film, and then we'll probably compare that to uh, how the actual black hole, which was imaged by the Event Horizon Telescope. Am I saying it right?
Yeah,
Right. Yeah.
right.
Right. So how do we compare those two? So first, we can probably start with how the black hole was depicted in the movie itself, how it came into being. I think you probably should take the initiative in this, right?
Yeah, so it's a very interesting
Yeah.
story actually. So the CG team, which was working on the black hole and the wormhole
Yeah.
part of
Double
the movie,
negative.
they basically,
Yeah.
yeah, so double negative. So they actually made a new
Right.
rendering software using equations that were
Right.
provided by Kip Thorne. So they developed basically a
Hmm.
new rendering software in itself, right? And after giving all the inputs that were required, when the
Hmm.
final model came
Hmm.
out, right, everyone was shocked because they were like, okay, there must be
Yeah.
some bug in the software because of which the model looks like this. And later on, Kip Thorne basically confirmed
Hmm.
that no, this is how a black hole is supposed to look, and it's very accurate. What
Yeah.
they have shown in the movie is very accurate actually, and it is a beautiful thing to see actually.
Yeah. That black hole was probably the centerpiece of the entire film, which like convinced me that that effort has been put into this in a way that it's scientifically more accurate, because yeah, it looked good, it looked visually very good, but the fact that it was so accurate so many years down the line, probably 5 years down the line, was just brilliant to see. Yeah.
And before this, what we have seen,
Yeah, you
normally
can
the
continue what we're
illustrations that
talking
we
about.
see of black holes, you normally see this again, a well kind of a thing, which will have some lensing,
Right.
and that is what you call a black hole. So this was the first time actually a 3D model of a
Right.
black hole was shown to the general public.
Right.
So yeah, amazing job done by the team and obviously by Kip Thorne.
Right. So I was actually reading a little bit about what kind of equations did he actually use to just so yeah, I think we didn't say this before. So to form a simulation, you need equations and you need its solutions. So when you fit in a certain set of solutions, so every sort of a like a theory has a certain equation attached to it, like it's called a conjecture. So Einstein had this like theories and conjectures about space time and relativity and all of that stuff, and he had all of these equations, but the solution to these equations were still not very convincing to a lot of people, and they had their own set of solutions to it. So what was happening was that Kip Thorne even included his solutions in that paper that he published along with double negative. He actually published a paper on how to simulate a black hole. So what I saw over there was that there was a set of solution, and they ran the simulation through equation running through time and other dimensional aspects which I'm not very sure about, because yeah, uh, and he used the Einstein Maxwell dilation equation, and he used the Einstein Gauss Bonnet theories. So the Einstein Maxwell dilation equation, what it basically does is that it lets you understand how space and time dilates around, say, like a black hole, or like a object like a black hole, basically how it warps around it. And by space and time, I just don't mean like gravity. I also mean light altogether, or even mass, basically. And the Einstein Gauss-Bonnet theories, what they did was that it helped in adding the multi-dimensional, or not just multi-dimensional, like the higher dimensional aspect to this black hole. So you can't just be like, the first simulation that is run is usually run as a multi-dimensional thing, and it is then sectioned into three-dimensional, so that we can probably understand it better. So in a four-dimensional, like if you look at a tesseract, which is a four-dimensional representation of a square or a cube, whatever you want to call it, and and it doesn't look as enticing, probably. But like what we saw inside the film, there was a tesseract in itself, and it did not look anything like the tesseract that we know of from the models that we have. I'm forgetting what kind of models they're called. Schiepel model or something like that. Yeah, I don't remember that. But it's basically a sort of a standard transformation theory, wherein you convert a square into a cube to convert it from 2D to 3D, and then a cube into say a tesseract to convert it from 3D to fourth dimensional. So these two equations and their solutions were simulated, and we had this sort of a understanding of then how the topology of how the thermodynamics and all of these properties of the black hole would exist. And then with the help of these like properties of the black hole, we were able to define or like parameterize a black hole in our space and time, because we know topology, we know thermodynamics, and we know like molecular aspects, but what we don't know is like the four-dimensional aspect. So I think this was something which was testimony to how good Kip Thorne was, because had it not been that his solutions which he ran in the simulations, had it not been that they were accurate enough, probably the black hole which looked like that Interstellar would not be as similar looking as, say, to what we found the M87 through the Event Horizon Telescope, even very, very recently. So I think it's very fascinating for me to see that a director with not much scientific background just give a green light to this, to go and have fun with your equations and just bring out whatever you have, and we'll try and use it. I think the one input that Christopher Nolan had was that we will shoot it from this polar view rather than, say, from a North Pole view or from a South Pole view. They shot it from an equatorial sort of a polar view. And what we are seeing is basically this gravitational lens thingy that we have. So gravitational lens, in order for me to explain that in layman terms, is probably imagine that there's a camera right in front of the black hole, which is able to observe how the light bends around the black hole. So it basically happens in two strips. There's a strip which goes around the top of the black hole, and then around the accretion ring surrounding it, and then there's one from the bottom part of it. So if you see from like the interstellar point of view, you'll see that both of these rings have almost equal luminosity. They're illuminated almost equally. But when the simulation was run, they did not have the same luminosity. So the reason that they have the same luminosity was because of the fact that our human eye and the cameras that we have currently, they cannot resolve so much high dynamic range, basically, in terms of like layman camera terms, and they can't differentiate between the brightness of the upper level of the bending of light and the lower level of the bending of light. And that is why when you compare it to the M87, you see that in the M87 there's a portion which is brighter, like a semicircular disk which is brighter, and then there's a semicircular disk which is not so bright. So that's the reason behind it, because the telescope has the resolution to resolve that, but our IMAX cameras do not have the resolution to resolve that through the simulation that we can make. But then again, I think I got this question from the little Q&A that we had, I thought about keeping it safe for later, but I can probably answer it over here. So it asks, why do the images look different? Like, why we can't see sort of a Saturnish ring, like, which is called an accretion ring, in the M87 photograph that we have, and we can see that in the interstellar version of it.
Yeah,
So maybe
so
you can take up with that.
actually, as you just mentioned, right, it depends a lot on the plane of view, the angle at which you're looking at the black hole. So in
Right.
the movie, we are looking directly at the black hole, head on at the black hole, basically. So that is why you are able to see that, ring kind of a thing, that, one horizontal as well as
Mm.
one vertical ring, right? Whereas if you look at a
Right.
black hole from directly at the pole, you will see only one ring rather than the two rings, right? So
Mm.
yeah, and when we look at the M87, the basically plane of view is not directly head on, so that's why there's some
Right.
yeah, difference there, as you just mentioned. So that is one big reason. Other reason, as you mentioned, the brightness part of it. Yeah, so
Right.
that you explained very clearly. So that's pretty much
Oh,
why
I
I
think I
said.
speak a lot. I should probably speak less and let you speak more. Probably people are more interested in that. But
No.
yeah.
Also, it is the precision of the image that we got from Event Horizon Telescope, right? So there's a very interesting story behind it. So the team that was working on this, so it consisted of more than 200 scientists and engineers,
Mhm.
and they basically, what they did is that they had observatories all around the
Mhm.
world. So all these observatories, what they did is that they made a like Earth-sized
Right.
telescope, because that is what you need to actually look at a black hole, which is so
Mhm.
far away from the planet. And the team worked for almost
Mhm.
2 years, if I'm not wrong, and they almost had like 5 petabytes of data. So that's like insane
Yeah.
amount of data, right? Just to get
Right.
this one image. So you can think of how difficult it was to, carry out this whole experiment and observation. So that's a really interesting story. And still we got, a lot of people were actually disappointed, because the image was not that precise. But yes, it's another challenge, and definitely the future
Right.
teams will come up with a
Right.
better image. Let's hope for that. It was a huge thing, yeah. Looking at a black hole, that's something that we thought we can never directly look at, or we can, have an image of it. Other than the
Right.
illustrations that we had, was
Right. True. True.
commendable, and
Both
yeah,
the
hats off to the
scientific
team.
and the filming team as well, for representing it the way they did. So okay, now I think we can now come towards the singularity part. So I think we briefly teased it that I briefly teased it that singularity, from what Kip Thorne has said in his book, is that there isn't just one type of singularity. There are like a few different types of singularity. So there's this common singularity which is like most commonly observed, like you said, which has this spaghetti effect which you talked about, uh, and it's called a chaotic singularity. Then there is this naked singularity, which is much more problematic, because of the fact that the singularity exists outside the event horizon. So in that point of time, the extent to which it can like just gobble up space and time is just infinitely worse as compared to, say, something which is below the event horizon. Because if something even goes remotely near, some like light years near, it can probably gobble it up, and we never know what's going to happen over there into the singularity. So that's the naked singularity. But what Kip Thorne proposed, this is again a speculative part, was that inside a black hole there can exist multiple singularities, not just one singularity. So he said that chaotic singularity is probably the backbone of most black holes. Probably without the chaotic singularity, a lot of black holes would just cease to exist. Like, it's just not possible. But it's not true that it's the only singularity that can exist over there. So what he proposes is that just above the chaotic singularity, like where it began, and its own event horizon, chaotic singularity's event horizon. There were two other singularities which were gentler singularity. Why he did that is because of in a gentler singularity, although the time and space is directional, but it's not as heavily directional as say what we have in a chaotic singularity. So uh, you can, if you have the access to like higher dimensions, which probably the bulk beings do, you can probably tweak the gentler singularities in a way that it directs towards a certain direction. Like if you want to like curve around the black hole, you can probably do that. If you want to like swivel up and down like in a harmonic motion, you can probably do that. So what they did is that I'll put up a image again because this is going to get very confusing, is that they put two singularities, and those two singularities were placed in a way that Cooper, when he entered the event horizon and went below it, he gets caught by one of these two singularities and its directional waves. And either of these two directional waves would have ended up him landing in a tesseract which was placed there at the merger of these two singularities. Like if you get caught in one of these two singularities, you end up in a tesseract. That's how the directional wave works in that case. Now, this is very, very speculative. This is something which Kip Thorne said that at this point of time, I was plucking my hair from my arms because I had none left in my head, because this was extending so far beyond what we had researched that I was not very sure that we should put it in altogether. But then Christopher Nolan specifically asked for a very puzzling ending, in a way that it's not just puzzling the normal audiences like the most of the movie did, but it's also puzzling the scientists and the physicists in a way that it sparks a debate whether this can exist or not. So this was something which was like you said, you didn't really like that part. He should have been crushed into like so many of that, but he took the liberty of having a being which understands higher dimensions and understands how black hole can be tweaked in a way that it can be used to their benefit. So singularity is not singular in a black hole, apparently, according to this theory, which was fascinating for me. And I try and looked into it, and I found that it can be a possibility. It can be a possibility, although very dim, but it can be a possibility. So it depends on whether you are a pessimistic person or optimistic person. It just goes down to that. So
Actually, some scientists think that the existence of singularity in itself is not possible.
right,
So they are challenging, even the idea of singularity. So
right,
let's see in what direction it goes, and
true,
because I think it gives a lot of liberty to a lot of people,
right,
especially to the science community,
right,
to which direction they want to take it.
right.
And yeah, this was really interesting to hear.
Mhm.
And yeah, let's see within what we
Right,
observe in the future, and whether we even see a
right.
singularity ever. So, like you talked about the naked singularity, right? It's like another topic, and all in its own self, because it's highly
It's highly debatable. True,
debatable whether it exists.
true.
Yeah,
I mean
yeah.
that's the thing. Like I think there are so many theories which are going around which have not been resolved properly, that we can't really identify how all of this works all together, because our regular physics that we study in 11th and 12th, it just completely doesn't work inside a black hole. It just, yeah, that's not going to happen. So we resorted to say quantum physics, but then again that has its own limitations. uh, and now we are like slowly, as we are building towards say like a like quantum gravity, and then we are building towards say I'm forgetting the name, string theory. Yes, and all of this, the M theory in my head. I was like M something, but yeah, the M theory, and we are realizing that a lot of this can probably like happen if this theory is proven in this way. So there are still like 1,000 limitations. Probably like undermining the number, but like a huge number of limitations too. Even if the theories are proven right, whether we will get to know what's really inside a black hole and what really forms a black hole in the first place in itself. If we can probably understand that, we can probably also understand how the universe came into existence. Like we talked about the gravitational waves. The reason why it's so important was because
Yeah.
it's induced from the collision of two black holes, and we were able to study the waves that were generated from it. So yeah, it's very important because probably Big Bang happened in a very similar way. There's a theory about it, and if we can at least be able to gather the data, we now have an equipment that can at least just gather the data. uh, it's a step towards finding out where it all began. So yeah, I think quantum theory is rather string theory is trying to unify all the forces together. uh, Relativity is trying to introduce the differences between all of these forces, electromagnetic, gravitation, all of that forces. And then now we are having all of this like loop quantum gravity theory, which is like how these forces interact with each other. So we never really know if there's one system that satisfies everything, but yeah, the quest is on to do that. And at least as enthusiasts, it's nice to understand or like indulge into all of this stuff altogether. No, you
No,
wanted to say
so
something.
actually, I wanted to talk about string theory. So it,
Right.
like I personally think that it will die down in some time because it has a lot of theories in it. Yeah. So what basically,
Right.
if you want to understand string theory in a layman term, right? So it's basically it assumes that there are more than three dimensions. If I have to consider time also, then there are more than four dimensions. So the number of dimensions that are assumed in string theory are 11. So 10 your basic
Mhm.
dimensions and one is your time. And what they say is that a lot of these dimensions, they are minuscule. They are very
Mhm.
small. They are at
Mhm.
a quantum level.
Mhm.
But and so basically, they assume that everything comes out of strings. So depending on the vibration of a string, you get different kind of atoms or
Right.
maybe quarks and all.
Right.
So, but yeah, a lot of people have been working on string theory lately, but it doesn't seem to give any solid observation or solid explanation for a lot
True.
of things. So I personally think that it will die down in
String
some
theory
time.
was quite a hot subject, I think 10 years ago. When I remember there were like, we used to go to this in Delhi in Pragati Maidan. There used to be this book fair, and there was this science section in the book fair. So I don't really like read books. I usually try and like listen to books as much as I can, like from when like the last time that I can remember. But sometimes I have to like force myself to read. And I remember this very specifically because I was in one of these book fairs, and I was in the science section, and I was seeing that there is a plethora of books on just how string theory is like the one and all theory which will save the universe, and it's creating and all of that stuff, and then how we can create a universe for itself, for ourselves. And I was like, okay, this looks very fascinating. And then I think around that time, people were watching Big Bang Theory as well, and they were like, there's string theory in that, it must be very accurate. Yeah, Big Bang Theory is not very accurate as a show. I mean, I there's a question actually we have in a Q&A where they're like, how do you compare Big Bang Theory science to interstellar science? And I'm like, should I really even put this into the podcast? Because you know, when I was in standard eighth or ninth, I think I was a little new to this whole genre of like sitcoms and American sitcoms and all of that stuff. So when I saw it, then I was fine with it. It was nice. It was good. It was a good laugh and all of that stuff. As in when I started to understand like what they're really talking about and the physics part, it's just that they're talking about very basic stuff, but in a very fast-paced manner. So it's like you Google search something, and then the first thing that you find over there, and then that's what they're talking about. And I mean, there came a point when I was like, I can't just watch it because it's funny. I need the science to be better. If these guys are scientists, I need it to be better. So I had to stop watching that show. Unfortunately, after I think the fourth season, but Apparently, it went on for like 12 seasons. So yeah, congratulations to them.
I think that's the thing with when you get involved in science a lot more and you become very serious about it,
Right.
then you try to look for the accuracy of the science, and if the show or the movie doesn't do that, doesn't justify that,
Right.
then you kind of lose an interest. So that is the reason why I also became very picky
Mhm.
when it comes to movies and shows, and that is the reason why I did not watch The Big Bang Theory. I'm really sorry for that, but it was something that I never. I actually started watching it, but it did not interest me
Right.
that much, especially because the science was like
True.
not that good enough. So that's the reason why I didn't continue with it. So yeah, that's the
It's a
side
drawback
effect of it.
that I have in like the Tesseract. Let's move on to the Tesseract if that's okay. So apparently the Tesseract was placed there by these bulk beings at the exit point of one of these gentler singularities. And Cooper was fortunately caught in one of these singularities and then sent into the Tesseract. We have reached this far-fetched science fiction part of the film. Now we are inside the Tesseract. So I wanted to know your opinions on how did you feel about the Tesseract as a portal to take Cooper from that place, from the bulk dimension into say our solar system and our dimension.
I have I would say I have like very pessimistic thoughts about it because I really like that part of the movie.
Right.
So, okay, let's first understand what a
Right.
tesseract is, right? So, in a physical world, a
True.
tesseract
True.
will basically be a four-dimensional version of a cube. So, cube is, let's say, a three-dimensional
Right.
version of a square, right? So, sometimes we also call the tesseract as a hypercube. So, that's the more scientific name for it.
Mm.
So in the movie, what they have done is that this tesseract has been shown, that it was placed there by some advanced version of the human race, that basically traveled from the future to the present and placed it there. So it is more sort of like fitting science in the story part of it, and that's the reason why I did not like it that much. I'm really sorry, but yeah, it's like something that did not excite me, and rather I was very disappointed with it.
Right. Right. I was more on the optimistic side because that's usually what I do with films, obviously, and with the bias that I have for like Christopher Nolan. So it's not a surprise to anybody. Uh, but I really like the fact that they represented Tesseract as this physical representation of time. I really like that fact that it was one of those places where I think for the first time that I was introduced that time can be a physical dimension in itself, because like right now we can we can I think it was okay. I'll steal something from Neil deGrasse Tyson. He once said that so if you go and meet somebody, one of your friends, and you have to tell them your location and the time. So the location is basically say which street, which building, and which floor. So there's X, Y, and Z, which you can travel at any point of time. Uh, but the time is fixed. If you're not there at that point of time, then you're not there at that instance. So in a way, we don't have access to time in the same manner as we have access to other physical dimensions uh, in our universe. But time does exist linearly and strictly linearly in one direction. So what this fourth dimensional conceptualization of time states is that time probably is like this tesseract or like this fourth dimensional cube wherein you can interact with it physically and not just be linearly trapped by it. I like that portion, that visualization of it, that I can access time both ahead and in the past. Although the film just covered the past portion to not complicate stuff, I think, because then we will have this bootstrap paradox and all of that stuff. Uh, so he, I think the fact that they made this physical dimensional aspect of time inside a cube where we can access events that have happened to us, or then again reiterate events that have happened to us. I think that was something which was very, very pleasing for me to watch, and it was puzzling at first, but at least again it sparked a debate whether this can exist or not, and I started looking into it whether it can exist or not. And it's I know it's an optimist's choice that he chooses to agree with this, but yeah, that's who I am. What I was not very happy about, like, okay, but first we can also explain that since gravity and time are like this part of the same equation, so if we hamper one, we can probably hamper the other variable as well. That's like basic mathematics. So when I think there's a question in the Q&A about how is gravity being affected when he's pulling those strings, sort of plates, sort of inside the tesseract. It's basically, from my understanding, what it is that these are artificial gravitational plates, which when passed through the fourth dimension can have access to other gravitational anomalies inside a three-dimensional space. So it's sort of like a ripple effect, if you can say. At least that's what it's like showcased in the film. Like, so I think the gravity part and the time part is not something which is very confusing to me. What is very confusing for me is what happens, or which is not satisfying for me. It's not confusing. It's more like it's not satisfying. Is that this tesseract is a portal, which is supposed to take him from the bulk dimension to this his solar system, and it apparently docks near his daughter's bedroom, wherein both of them are on the opposite sides or opposite faces of the tesseract. I can probably show a visual image over there to like make people understand better, explain what the fuck. But anyway, what I didn't understand is that when this event ended and the tesseract collapsed, there was a lot of questions in my mind that, like, in the first place, why did it collapse in itself? I tried looking for the answer in terms of thermodynamics, but since it's just space-time gravity and there's not a lot of mass, I think thermodynamics was not the answer for it. And I was still
Yeah, so I found one explanation for
right,
it. I'm not sure how accurate it is. So, from the movie's perspective, right, what they said is that this tesseract was placed by the advanced
true,
human civilization, right? So it
mhm,
had a purpose to it. The purpose was basically the communication between
right,
Cooper and Murph, right? And also the transfer of quantum data that was
right,
required for the gravity equation. That was, that basically TARS, did that. Yeah, once the both these purposes were like served, now the test track was
right,
like, what do we do with the test track now? So the movie, the director and all, they thought that let's
right.
close the test track because now it has served the purpose. So that is one explanation that I could find out.
Yeah, what I'm interested in, what is exactly closing of a tesseract? Uh, because I don't really have a lot of answers for it. I know like how a tesseract converts from being a fourth dimensional object into a three-dimensional representation, like through opening it in one of those mathematical models. I don't remember it, but I can probably put in the image again. So I know it opens up to become like a three-dimensional space, and had it been that way, I would have probably it would have probably made more sense to me mathematically. That it's converting itself from a four-dimensional space into a three-dimensional space, so now it can cease to exist in our dimension. Or then again, the opposite, that it's already in a three-dimensional space and it's converting into a four-dimensional space. So it's something which still bugs me that we did not have enough clarity on this, and it's something I've watched so many of Kip Thorne's videos, so many of his books. I've read, by so many I mean like three, uh, and I still don't have an answer to this. I have Interstellar on Blu-ray. I've watched all the making, all the director's cut, with the director's narration and everything, and I still don't have an answer to it. So it's something which is the most puzzling part of the film. I would have wanted it to have a little more mathematical sense to it, even if it's speculative. I wouldn't have mind. But the fact that it's just left there
Okay, gotcha.
is something which is
For speculate about it.
yeah,
I also have
yeah.
a problem with the
Yeah.
uh, visual representation of time as a physical dimension,
Mhm.
which really excited you
Okay. Right.
because the
Right.
problem with it is that when we say something is moving, right? So it's basically motion of
Mhm.
that particular object over time. So time is more of a
Mhm.
referential dimension, if I have to use a word for it. What I've done here is
Right.
that they have shown time as something that you can traverse through, right? So in order
Right.
to do that, you will have to introduce another constant like time. So that is where
True.
it basically.
Just to maintain that reference.
Exactly,
True.
exactly. Just to, maintain the physical laws. So
Right.
that was really upsetting about it. And but yeah, the way they showed it is like it was not too exciting for me. It was like an okay thing.
Yeah.
But yes, just adding to the gravity part of it. So gravity is very interesting because it is the only thing that can travel between different
Mhm.
dimensions. That is, like in the movie itself, they have shown that Cooper is in a four-dimensional world, whereas Murph is in a three-dimensional world, right? So in order to communicate, you can only use
Right.
gravity. So that is how we see the gravity anomaly on in Murph's
True.
room also, and the weird motion of the second hand of the clock that Cooper gives to Murph. So yeah, that's a really interesting fact
Yeah.
about
I mean,
gravity.
okay. So I'm not gonna have like a full blown argument over here because it's gonna take days. But anyways, we can bug each other off in WhatsApp arguing about this. But uh, I think the what I understand, or what my theory is, what my limited theory is that we don't know how our dimensional things that we have, how will they transform into, say, when we cross over to a higher dimension. I'm not sure how XYZ coordinates would transform into higher dimensions. We have mathematical representations of it, but like I want to know the physical representations of it, of how it's going to like transform. So I have this theory. This was something which was asked by one of my other friends as well, that time is supposed to be this benchmark thing, that it's supposed to tell us where we are, this instance and all of that stuff. And if we have this existing at all at once, how do we know where we are? So I have this theory that probably when we are approaching higher dimensions, maybe the transformation is such that we have a three-dimensional equivalent and then we have a higher dimension equivalent. So the three-dimensional equivalent still exists for the benchmarking part, for the referential part, and then we have like this fourth dimension, or this higher dimension, transformative aspect of it, which can then help in like transforming the benchmark, transforming the linearity of time, as such. It's again far-fetched, not as far-fetched as why did the tesseract closed, but it's still very something that I can convince my optimistic mind with, that fine, I can live with this. It's fine by me. That's not a big deal. Do you want to talk about the planets after Cooper came back to our solar system? Uh, it felt a little too sci-fi for me. Like I think in the end it was probably the fact that the film was already 2 hour 50 minutes long, that they needed to cut short on a lot of things, and they probably skipped a lot of explanation at the end of it. So the like the rockets that we saw in the beginning of the film, they were apparently full blown orbital planets which were supposed to be taken off. And then those rockets in itself, or those planets in itself, have now been orbiting our own solar system, or the other solar system that we have. Sorry, our own solar system. Why did I say that? But anyway, uh, and it's using both centrifugal and centripetal forces to ground itself and create gravity within itself. But it takes like years and years of training for an astronaut to be able to resist those forces, and then expecting a human species just entirely lifting up from the earth and going into space, and then we have all these forces acting on the human species itself. That felt so far-fetched for me. I didn't know what was happening. Maybe it was the fact that since they understood how to harness gravity, maybe they didn't just use centripetal centrifugal forces, maybe they used something else. But then the cylindrical structure didn't really make sense to me. Like, why was it cylindrical in shape? And how was the gravity radially observed? Like when we saw the ball pierce through the window at the end. So it was something which was, again, felt like a little fast track just to like to conclude the emotional aspect of the film, which, like, being somebody who like cries watching like stupid rom-coms, I obviously related to that. So but when I watch it just for scientific exploration purposes, I still can't understand why is it like that. So if you have any inputs on that.
I think even in the movie, they have not given a lot of information about the whole gravity equation, right? Other than the fact that
Right.
Professor Brand had like two plans, which was Plan A and Plan B.
Right.
So this was,
Right.
so this was part of the Plan A, right? So basically, Plan A says that you
Right.
have to first solve the gravity equation, for which you
Mhm.
need some data that lies in in regions of the space where the gravity is immense. So that's
Like
why
the singularity.
yeah, exactly, that's why they go for the black hole, right?
Right.
So that is when when Coopers enter into the black hole, that's the data basically TARS converts into Morse code, and then Cooper translate
Again,
sends it to
Morse code is okay, peculiar choice, but okay.
So yeah, it was quite funny because I don't understand how you can translate that, that sort of information into Morse code and then send it to a human being over a watch, and then that human being basically interpreting that that sort of information and using that data to solve an equation. That was very weird for me at least. So I had a problem with the translation of that kind of data into Morse code and sending it over a wall. So that was very funny for me. So yeah, solving the gravity equation was the first thing, and then once they are able to solve the gravity equation, what they were basically aiming for was that currently the kind of technology we have, we can build like huge spaceships, that can basically take a lot of people from Earth to another region of the space. But we do not have the sort of technology that is required to build a rocket that will propel it off, right? So for that, because of the gravity part of it, problem of it. So for that, they needed to solve the gravity equation in order to harness gravity, right? So which was again very, it's a very far-fetched idea, as you said. And
Yeah, like
another
by harnessing, I think by harnessing we need to explain a little further that by harnessing we mean that I think we saw in the initial parts of the film that Cooper was throwing this coin onto like this lines of dust, and it was like getting attracted towards a particular space and not getting attracted towards like a space in between two particular lines. So it basically meant that they had this ability, or they knew that there was this ability to reduce the gravity in certain regions of space, and by reducing gravity you can bulk up more mass and propel it forward with lesser propelling force, because the force of gravity
yeah.
is less. So that's what is meant by harnessing. So sorry, continue after that.
Harnessing also means creating artificial gravity. So where
Right.
gravity does not exist on its own,
Right.
you're basically creating artificial
True.
gravity that we saw in the cylindrical
True.
weird part of it. So yeah, so that was the reason why they wanted to solve the gravity equation in its first place. I think we can talk about the Miller's planet, right? So
Right.
it was, yeah. So in the movie, what they have shown is that 1 hour on Miller's planet is equal to 7 years on Earth. So that kind of time dilation is a lot. So to basically have that kind of time dilation, you need to have very strong gravity. So that's the reason why a lot of people have been debating on this thing, that planet cannot be in such close proximity to the black hole, because the gravity will be so strong that it will basically shred into pieces. So also, like when we just talk about time dilation, so time dilation is very important to understand, because like for example, if I have to explain it to you, like I can do it using one paradox, which is called twin paradox, right? So in twin paradox, what happens is that you have a set of twins. One twin is an astronaut, and other the twin is like a regular human being, right? With a regular job. And the astronaut twin has been commissioned to travel to the nearest black hole, make do a few round trips around it, and come back. So when this astronaut twin comes back on Earth, what he observes is that the other twin has aged significantly. So the reason being that time flows differently for at different regions of the space, depending on the gravity and a lot of other factors. So when you are around the black hole, the gravity is so strong that time basically flows slowly for you, rather than when you're on Earth, it is flowing at a different pace. So it's a very interesting paradox to learn about. So it's like very it's basically used to explain the whole time dilation part of the science.
Right, right. That's probably, I think, the fact that they wanted to show the aging scene when they came back from the Miller's planet. I think they wanted to have that emotional aspect, so they took this liberty of sorts to have such a huge gravitational time dilation in that planet. I think I remember. I think there was one of the questions in Q&A. We are chipping off all the questions before the Q&A segment itself, but then again, it's fine. There was this question that when they were launching from Earth, they needed so much of thrust force and all of that. But then when they were launching from the Miller's planet, they could just take off just like that. How is that even possible? I think they kind of forget that when they were launching from Earth, they were not just launching the four people, they were launching a huge ton of equipment, a huge ton of like gear, food, and all of that stuff. And these rangers are specifically designed to go in and get out of of like gravitational fields. They're specifically tuned for that. So I think that kind of answers the questions about why they needed so much more force and like so less force. I think, yeah, basic physics probably in that in that aspect.
Yeah, I think the directors actually were not able to explain it in the movie, because even when taking off of the Miller's planet, the gravity is so much that you need a lot of propulsion for that. So that is one of the loopholes of the plot actually.
I think the decision when they were making whether to go to man's planet or Edmund's planet was again influenced by emotional context of the film, as compared to like the scientific context of the film, which was fine. I'm like, I can understand that because I make stupid decisions like that, but not in my field of work, which is their field of work. So yeah, that's yeah, again an extension.
Also, I have a problem with directors showing that love is a very strong thing. I personally think it's just a feeling. That's it. It does, it cannot have control or command over, a lot of things. But I think that is what, basically grabs the attention of the audience. So they, overuse it. Even in Interstellar, they did that. So I have a problem with that.
There's this question: can you explain the ending of Interstellar from the time he entered the black hole? I think we have done that probably
I think
to
we
a
did
large
that, yeah.
extent. But just to jog your memory, he enters the black hole, two types of singularities. He gets trapped by the gentler singularity, enters the tesseract, interacts with time as a physical dimension and gravity in the fourth dimension, and then his portal, the tesseract is used as a portal and is taken back to our solar system, where he but the tesseract is closed and he enters and like exists in our dimensions. That is the ending of Interstellar. Then there's another question: did they use an off-the-shelf physics simulator for simulating Gargantua? So yeah, like you said before, I think they created or modified a simulator.
So basically, what they, as I already said, right, what they did was that they got some information from Kip Thorne, some equations from him, and using those equations, they developed their own rendering software because the existing softwares they could not do, justice to this whole thing. So they developed their own rendering software, and then they, provided all the inputs that were required, basically all the simulations and everything that were required for that, and then they came up with the model. So that is how they did it.
So if we get Web's question, we'll probably answer that. Otherwise, I think probably this is the end of the podcast. God, we got really into the nitty gritty of stuff, which was good at least for me, because it had been a long time since I had like discussed physics at such an extent with somebody else. So this was a very nice exercise for me. I'm not sure how the audio listeners of the podcast would have comprehended everything that we said. But then again, this is probably a video first podcast, so yeah. Sorry if you're listening to this on Spotify. And thank you for sticking around for so
I just
long.
hope that the audience doesn't get bored because it's just too much science and a lot of explanation here. So I just hope they
Yeah,
don't
I,
get
I'm
bored.
I'm I'm predicting that probably in the first uh, 10 minutes we'll see a sharp decline in the number of listeners, and probably after that, like, yeah, I think in the first 30-35 minutes we'll see people trying to understand stuff, because they like the movie Interstellar so much visually, or maybe whatever, like, so. But I'm not sure if they'll carry on after that. Yeah, this is probably going to be a 2-hour episode, so it's going to be quite a ride, to be honest. So yeah. All right. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast. Uh, and
Thank you, Animesh, actually, for having me on this podcast. And, it's my first podcast, so I was really nervous about it. And लोगों ने समझ ही लिया होगा अब तक तो. But thank you for giving me this platform, and it was really nice, talking to you about the physics part of it, because, you know, uh, it normally doesn't happen that often. Ki I find people who share the same, thought
right,
process or way of thinking.
right,
So thank
right.
you for
I
that.
mean, okay. I'm not good with compliments, but okay. So thank you everybody else who watched this podcast, and hopefully you got something to that you could like probably pique your interest from this. So that was probably what my objective was when I was doing this podcast. So yeah, yeah, hopefully that happened. Anyways, I'll see you guys next week. I don't know, maybe it's a bit of a hectic month for me, so uh, yeah, I'll see you guys next week, and I'll just come back to you after I close all the cameras and stuff. Yeah. Give me 2 minutes.